Hello and welcome back to Biker Stuff. Today I will be back on the Zero. When Gary returned from his trip to Portsmouth, he complained about the steering feeling a bit notchy. After a quick investigation, I found it was caused by the headstock bearings. If you remember the Tiger we had, I replaced the bearings at 85,000 miles, even though they didn't really need doing. The Zero has only done 11,500 miles, so take a look at this. As you can see, there is clearly something very wrong. I dug out the Zero service manual to see what is involved in replacing the bearings. Every bike has minor differences and I didn't want to get this wrong. Here we go. The first job is to remove the two master fuses. Next, I removed the front wheel, which wasn't next in the manual, but I had already done that by the time I took the manual off the shelf, so we'll ignore that. Then, disconnect the 12-volt battery. I tucked the leads out of the way to prevent either of them making contact with the battery terminals. The manual says to remove the headlight next. With hindsight, I think it could be done without removing it, although I know it would make removing the headlight support bracket difficult to unscrew from the upper and lower yokes. You will see what I mean when I get to it. Before you can remove the headlight, you have to remove the dash. Take out the two upper screws on the front dash panel. Disconnect the dash wiring harness. Remove the lower screws and take the dash panel off. I still can't remove the headlight until the wiring is out of the way. I started by loosening the right hand indicator to allow me to slide the grey throttle harness off. Photograph everything from as many angles as you can. When I came to refit all these cables, I did struggle. Clip the cable ties, being careful not to damage any of the wires. I remove the indicators now to give me a little extra space to work in. Move the wires aside so that you can get to the top headlight surround screws. I coloured the positive wire of the right hand indicator to make it easier when I reassembled it. Yes, I know I should have used green for the right one. Undo the lower headlight mounts. Then loosen the top ones. I would remove the headlight surrounds now while the headlight is still attached. Remove the top headlight screws and be careful as the headlight can now drop. Then unplug the headlight and put it somewhere safe. Now we have to remove the tank. The front panel that wraps around the underside of the headstock now needs taking off. It is only held on with 2 screws either side, one near the top, above the grille, and one at the bottom. Remove the screw that clamps the brake hose to the lower yoke. Undo the wheel sensor connector. It is at this point that you are meant to remove the wheel and mudguard, but hey ho, I have already done it. Take photographs of where the cables go for when you come to put it all back together again later. The forks come next. Loosen the top yoke, then the 2 on the lower yoke. Slide the forks down and out. The 2 screws that hold the dash mount on are difficult to get to. Once removed, cut all the remaining cable ties and take the rusty support off. Put some tape on the handlebars and mark where the join is so that you can put it back in the same place. Undo the handlebar clamp. I hung the handlebars by some rope from the roof to keep them out of the way, which also keeps the brake reservoir upright. There are handlebar risers on this bike, which needed to be removed to allow me to get the stem nut. By the way, this is 41mm if you need to buy one in preparation. With the C-spanner, undo the stem and lower it out. As you can see, the lower bearing was the reason the steering behaved as it did. Next, the outer racers need to be removed from the headstock. A long drift is one option. Hammer it out by tapping around in 3 places evenly until the shell pops out of the top. Then do the same for the bottom. Using a mini grinder, I cut into the inner race and popped it open with a chisel and a hammer. Zero-use angular contact bearings which have little protection from the elements, so I replaced them with taper roller bearings. Job 1 is to pull the new outers into the headstock. After cleaning the insides, I was ready to fit them. You never grease interference fits like this, no matter what some idiot on the internet tells you. I used 2 bearing puller discs. You can see these on the video I made when I bought the hydraulic press. I'll put a link up in the corner for you. I connect the 2 ends with a length of M10 thread and carefully pull them in one at a time. I packed the bearings with grease. As these bearings do not move much and never get hot, and axle grease is not suitable. I used Morris K99 waterproof grease for this. Being waterproof is the main requirement. Then, with my hydraulic press and a length of steel tube, I pushed the inner half of the bearing down to the base of the stem. Again, the inner surface of the bearing and the mating surface of the stem should be clean, but do not grease them. Push the newly refurbished stem up into the head. Push the upper bearing onto the stem, followed by a new seal, and screw the nut on. With your C-spanner, tighten the nut sufficiently so the stem moves freely and without binding. Before I could fit the rest of the bike, I needed to respray the rusty dash mount. So I brought it home and gave it a few coats of smooth hammerite. Now it is just a matter of reassembling it all. Well, I say just. Getting the cables back in where they belonged was more difficult than it should have been, and after a few goes, I think it's all happy. Forks on. Handlebars on. Before I refitted the mudguard, I bought and attached an extender from Pyramid Plastics. I'll pop a link to the part in the description below and a link in the top corner to the hugger extender I fitted a few weeks ago. Hopefully that will prevent the bearings getting so wet, although I think using a different type of bearing that can hold grease better will certainly give the bearings in the steering a longer life. I hope you found that useful or interesting. Thank you for watching. I know you liked it, so tell your friends and I'll see you here next time on Biker Stuff.